Then, good evening everybody.
So, guten Abend allerseits.
Let's open with prayer.
Lasst uns mit Gebet anfangen.
Dear Heavenly Father,
Lieber himmlischer Vater,
I want to thank you again for this new day of life,
ich möchte dir ein weiteres Mal danken für diesen neuen Tag des Lebens,
for all your help and protection,
für all deinen Schutz, die du über uns gebracht hast.
I want to thank you that we are again in the class now and have the opportunity to study your word.
Und ich möchte dir danken, dass wir jetzt wieder in der Klasse sind und dass wir die Möglichkeit haben, dein Wort zu studieren.
And I'm asking you that you please bless us as a class and help us to receive the word.
Und ich möchte bitten, dass du uns als Klasse segnest und dass du uns hilfst, dein Wort zu erhalten.
Help Brother Lawrence to be able to present your word.
Bitte hilft Bruder Lorenz, dass er imstande ist, dein Wort so darzubringen.
In the best way possible.
In das beste und beste Weg, der nur möglich ist.
Of course, have the translation and the technique,
Und bitte segne auch die Übersetzung und den Technik.
and help us to also to remind ourselves the things that we've already learned,
Und bitte hilft uns zu erinnern an all das wir bereits gelernt haben,
in order to understand better this topic.
um besser dieses Thema verstehen zu können.
Please come amongst us through the Holy Spirit and teach us the truth.
So bitte kommt unter uns durch den Heiligen Geist und lehre uns deine Wahrheit.
In Jesus' name, amen.
In Jesu Namen. Amen.
Alright, so the notes are in the live stream group.
So, es gibt Notizen, die sind in der Livestream-Gruppe in Englisch und Deutsch.
And this evening we will look a little bit at the French Revolution.
Und heute Abend werden wir etwa die französische Revolution anschauen.
And so everybody has access to the notes.
Hat jeder Zugang zu den Notizen?
Okay. Okay, so let's begin with the first quote from Great Controversy.
So, lasst uns mit der ersten Zitat von Großen Kampf anfangen.
And there she just comments on the horrors of the French Revolution.
Und da kommentiert sie über die Grusseligkeiten der französischen Revolution.
It says, then came those days when the most barbarous of all codes was administered by the most barbarous of all
Barbarous.
barbarous of all tribunals. When no man could greet his neighbors or say his prayers without danger of committing a capital crime, when spies lurked in every corner, when the guillotine
Yes.
guillotine was long and hard at work every morning, when the jails were filled as close as the holds of a slave ship, when the gutters ran foaming with blood into the Seine, while the daily wagon loads of victims were carried to their doom through the streets of Paris, the proconsuls, whom the Sovereign Committee had set forth to the departments, revealed an extravagance of cruelty unknown even in the capital. The knife of the deadly machine rose and fell too slow for the work of slaughter. Long rows of captives were moved down with grape shot. Holes were made...
Mowed down, like mowing grass.
Oh, yes.
Niedergemäht.
Mowed down, yes, with grape shot. Holes were made in the bottom of crowd barges. Lyons was turned into a desert. At Arras, even the cruel mercy of a speedy death was denied to the prisoners. All down the Loire, from Saumur to the sea, great flocks of crows and kites feasted on naked corpses, twined together in hideous embraces. No mercy was shown to sex or age. The number of young lads and of girls of 17 who were murdered by that execrable government is to be reckoned by hundreds. Babies torn from the breasts were tossed from pike to pike along the Jacobins' ranks. In the short space of 10 years, multitudes of human beings perished. Okay, so what does Sister White say? How long did the French Revolution last?
So, was sagt Ellen White? Wie lange dauerte die französische Revolution an?
2 years.
10 years.
Es war 10
Okay.
Jahre.
So, when we just illustrate this,
Und wenn wir das hier darstellen,
this would be here the 1260 from 538 to 1798.
also wenn dies hier die 1260 darstellt von 538 bis zur 1798 am Ende.
So basically, we have this 10 years marked here at the end.
Es
Okay?
gibt diese 10 Jahre hier am Ende markiert.
So, and if you want to be more precise, it lasted even until 1799.
Und wenn wir genau sein wollen, es dauerte bis zu 1799.
But I don't know, maybe this has something to do with the chart,
Aber vielleicht hat das was mit der Karte zu tun,
because there's 1798/1799.
denn es sagt an der Karte 1798-99.
Okay, so in this time here, before the French Revolution started, who was ruling?
Also in diese Zeitperiode hier, noch bevor der französische Revolution begann, wer herrschte?
Ludwig.
The north.
Yes, the King of the North,
Das
right?
war der König des Nordens.
Okay, so King of the North. But now, who came up here?
Aber hier in der 10, wer kam herauf?
So,
Yes, the King of the South,
Der
right?
König des Südens.
Okay. So, and I think it's no accident that we have the same pattern, right, in our fractal.
Und ich glaube, dass das kein Zufall sei, dass wir in unserem Fraktal heute denselben Muster zu sehen bekommen.
Yeah. So basically, we had the King of the North ruling,
So, wir hatten den König des Nordens, der regierte.
because we understand 538 was typifying which event at the end of the world?
Am Ende der Welt 538 schattet welches Ereignis voraus? Am Ende der Welt?
Sunday law, right?
Das Sonntagsgesetz.
So, and we understand also 2014 is a type for the Sunday law.
Wir
Right?
verstehen auch, dass 2014 ein Typus auf das Sonntagsgesetz ist.
So the King of the North was ruling, but now, here at the end, suddenly the King of the South came up,
So
right?
der König des Nordens herrschte, aber dann plötzlich am Ende der König des Südens kam herauf.
So that's this 10 that we have marked here.
So
Right?
das ist diese 10, die wir hier markiert haben.
And this is basically when now this Greek horn comes up and pushed against the two-horned beast.
Und das ist, wenn dieses griechisches Horn hier heraufkam und stieß gegen diesen zweihörnigen Machttier.
Yes?
I'm not so sure you're meant to look at it like that though, because if you look at the Sunday law, right, it's marking a 10.
Also der Sonntagsgesetz an sich markiert ein 10
And the midnight cry also to the end marks a 10.
und der Mitternachtsruf bis zur Ende markiert auch einen 10.
Okay, so, and then you've got this 10 at the end, which
Then-
there's, in that 10 there's also another 10.
Und dann gibt
Ja.
es diese 10 am Ende und innerhalb von diesen 10 gibt es eine weitere 10.
So I think this illustration of the French Revolution, this 10 is just a symbol on its own. We know the French Revolution is marked at the midnight cry, so surely that's where you would mark it.
Also diese französische Revolution als 10 ist ein Zeichen für sich und wir wissen, dass die französische Revolution beginnt am Mitternachtsruf. Sicherlich würden wir es denn da markieren auf der Linie.
I think, symbols have more than one meaning, right?
Also ich meine, dass Symbole mehr als eine Deutung haben
And we
können.
mark the French Revolution here at the Midnight Cry based upon 1793.
Und wir haben die französische Revolution hier an der Mitternachtsruf markiert, basierend auf 1773. 93, Verzeihung.
This is when they burned the Bibles and basically put the two witnesses to death.
Da haben sie die Bibeln verbrannt und die 2 Zeugen umgebracht.
But I think in this illustration we illustrate the number 10 of the French Revolution.
Aber in dieser Darstellung stellen wir die Nummer 10 des französischen Revolutions dar.
And historically, that's an accurate depiction.
Und historisch gesehen ist das eine akkurate Darstellung.
That's what I'm saying, it's not though, it's 89 to 99.
Yes.
So I'm saying it's not really, I mean, I don't know if that's...
Yeah, I don't know. I marked it down.
Also es ist
I don't know,
1789
but I don't know that that's...
bis 99.
I mean, we definitely have it marked on the chart. Okay.
Also wir haben das auf jeden Fall auf der Karte markiert.
So
But that's to do with the agricultural cycle, not really Gregorian years. I mean, she marks 1798 as the when the papacy gets a deadly wound. So.
Also der 1798, 99 auf der Karte hat was mit der Wirtschaft Jahr zu tun und nicht mit der gregorianischen Jahren zu tun. What did you say then?
No, I'm just I've not got a problem with it being illustrated as a 10. I just don't know that it marks that 10 at the end. That's the only.
Also ich habe kein Problem, dass es markiert als ein 10 ist. Ich weiß nur nicht, ob es als diese 10 am Ende zu markieren ist.
okay. So I just wanna. I mean, it's very plain, right? That the Lord showed us this history.
Also es ist sehr klar zu sehen, dass der Herr uns hier in unserer Zeit diese Geschichte gezeigt hat.
So therefore, this must be somehow being illustrated in the past.
So unsere Geschichte jetzt muss irgendwo in der Vergangenheit zu sehen sein.
But you've got at the beginning of our 10, you have the deadly wound being illustrated, right? So
Am Anfang von unserer 10, es gibt der Todeswunde, der dargestellt wird.
okay, and then the French Revolution parallel with the Nicarague, both illustrated in the 10. So I don't know why.
Der französische Revolution wird dargestellt durch den Mitternachtsruf, also beide dargestellt durch den 10.
So just my own personal thing, if I was going to bring that into somewhere here, it would be from this middle way map.
Also wenn ich das französische Revolution hier auf unsere Linie hineinbringen würde, ich werde es von dieser mittleren Wegmarke bis hier hineinbringen.
Which would be a parallel to the Midnight Cry.
Und diese wäre eine Parallel zur Mitternachtsruf sein.
That's all the argument I make, and I'm not going against anything we can illustrate in it is, but okay, but
I can't cope with that.
okay, but you'd have to show me, right, when we come to the 50th of the 4th month there where the French Revolution began.
Yes, that's exactly what we
Okay,
taught thus far. Okay, so it's right here where the south begins to push against the north, right?
So, es ist gerade hier, wo der Süden gegen den Norden stießt.
So in this sense, this is basically where the south came up, starting basically to rule, right?
1848.
So in
That's-
diesem Sinne
that's-
ist es hier, wo der Süden kommt auf, um zu regieren.
The Great Horn, right?
Parallel to Sunday, what,
1848 ist parallel mit dem Sonntagsgesetz.
Okay.
Look, it's right there, look.
It's,
when you
it's
take
right
the-
there. It's
When you take the fractal,
I
look,
can't.
you don't need to argue with it, look. You take the fractal there, the 10, it's the beginning of that fractal is a parallel to the Sunday law, not
Also-
a parallel to the Midnight.
Diesen 10 hier oder diesen 10 hier am Anfang ist es eine Parallel zum Sonntagsgesetz, not what?
Not, it's parallel to 1848 because the
Also es ist
the
parallel zu
seven thunders is repeating.
1848.
You'd have to show in
Die
the
sieben
seven
Donnern wiederholen
thunders
sich.
where the French Revolution begins right at the beginning of the seven
Also wir
thunders.
mussten in den 7 Donnern denn zeigen können, wo der französische Revolution am Anfang der 7 Donnern anfängt.
It doesn't, it begins at the second part of it, that's what I'm saying.
Es fängt nicht am Anfang an, es fängt an der zweite Teil.
This is 1793, not 1798.
Doesn't
Also
matter.
dies ist 1793, nicht
Doesn't matter. It's
1798.
still the French Revolution, and it's still symbolized by a 10 they just put them together line upon line.
Also es ist immer noch der französische
that's your
Revolution
word. It's no.
und
No, Lawrence, why are you saying that?
es ist immer noch dargestellt durch eine 10. Wir machen sie nur zusammen, Linie auf Linie.
Given you the arguments for it, right? When you take the bigger fractal, it has to represent the smaller one, right? So when you go to the bigger fractal, what happens at the beginning, right? You have
Also
the
der
Sunday
große
law.
Fraktal stellt der kleinere Fraktal dar. Also wenn wir zum Anfang von großen Fraktal gehen, wir haben den Sonntagsgesetz
1848 marks the south coming against the north.
und 1848 markiert den Süden gegen den Norden aufkommen.
Okay, but then when you when you follow the fractal on the second half of the fractal,
Yeah, so
where it does it again.
Und wenn du den
Yes.
Fraktal weiter folgst, der zweite Hälfte des Fraktals, ich meine hier,
No, Scott, Midnight Cry forward.
also so hier, der zweite Hälfte der Fraktals ist, wo es sich wiederholt. Okay, ja, das-
Okay, so 1848 typifies here the French coming up.
so 1848
So-
schattet die Franzosen
South
hier aufkommen.
Comes south comes.
So, Süden kommt auf, Süden kommt auf.
Yes,
So-
I'm in agreement with that.
Yes,
Total agreement, but it's not the French Revolution, that's all I'm saying.
of course
Also,
it is.
das stimme ich überein damit, aber das ist nicht die französische
You
Revolution.
can't
There's
see
two
this.
phases of it, that's what I've shown you, just like there's two phases of the death decree.
Also es gibt zwei Phasen zur französischen
You would have
Revolution,
to show
genauso
me
wie es
now
zwei Phasen zum
Where at
Todesdekret
the
gibt.
beginning of the Sunday law, they're putting people to death and chopping their heads off.
Also du musstest mich zeigen am Anfang des Sonntagsgesetzes, wo sie Leute zum Tode verurteilen und köpfen.
It's got to parallel, that's what I'm saying, line
No.
upon line.
Death decree, death decree.
No, but you're not being put to death there, it's only
Death decree, it's right there. I mean,
Lawrence, you're
uh,
now making the most silly arguments.
way.
No, you are. At the Sunday law there, you're not being put to death. It's a law that they make.
Also
And
im
you've got to
Sonntagsgesetz
break
ist ein
that law
Gesetz, die
and
sie
be
hier
brought before the
erlassen.
kings before you're going to come face to death. And that's the progression that it takes
Und du
you
musst
to.
dieses Gesetz erstmal brechen und vor den Königen kommen, bevor du zum Tode verurteilt wirst.
So
Und das
my
ist der
arguments are
voranschreitende Prozess, die du
in
durchgehen musst.
accordance with everything that we teach, the pattern that's shown. You're now adding something new to the pattern that's going to be conflicting with the reform lines above. That's what I'm saying, that's wrong.
Also wenn Bruder Mark meinte, dass Bruder Lorenz was jetzt, wenn wir das machen würde, dann werden wir was zu den Muster hinzufügen, der Konflikt?
Yes, it's
Yeah.
conflict.
No, no, I know what you mean.
Conflict.
I'm looking for.
Conflict.
Das im Konflikt sein werde mit den Reformlinien davor.
Look, I've made my argument, I'm not going to take any more of your time, but I'm just saying to you, that is a valid point that I'm making.
I don't think so.
That doesn't matter whether you don't think so, I'm just saying.
Okay, then show me this parallel.
Also zeig mir diesen Parallel.
It's just the principle.
People getting killed here, people not getting killed here.
No, it's not, it's the principle, it's just showing you death decree, but
Yeah, it's the same here.
no,
Okay.
it's not, that's a silly
People
argument.
getting killed here, people
Lawrence,
don't.
listen, I tell you, I'm going to reprove you because you're making stupid arguments,
No way.
right? No,
It's valid
if you're
stuff.
going to make arguments, make honest arguments. We've gone through this many times. The Sunday law, they make a death decree, but they're not putting people to death right there, right? What's being paralleled at the Sunday law and the Midnight Cry is that there's a death decree there. Nothing to do with people being put to death. That's the parallel, right? And you're trying to use that as an argument to debunk me, and it's not right what you're doing. So if you're going to make an argument, make an honest one, right? So what I'm doing is I'm trying to show you things in a logical manner. If you can prove this, you have to prove it on the line above. That's what I'm saying, and you can't do it, right? So that argument is a valid argument. You don't need to be like that towards me because you disagree with me, right? It's wrong. Your disagreements are not valid what you're saying. That's the point that I'm making.
I simply can't believe that somebody cannot see this. I mean, that's just, I don't know. Because the Lord clearly showed us this time here, right? Isn't it a clear, true illustration here?
Also unsere Zeit hier, ist das nicht eine klare Darstellung, was der Herr uns in unserer Zeit gezeigt hat?
I mean, it's very clear that this is how it developed.
Also es ist sehr klar, dass hier ist der Entwicklung, wie die Sachen sind.
You can use that argument as much as you want. It doesn't validate what you're saying. That argument there, 2014, it's fine, no problem. It fits into the pattern. But it's not illustrating what you're trying to illustrate. That's all I'm saying.
Also dieses Argument 2014, das fügt in den Muster hinein, aber es sagt nichts, was du möchtest. Das
And
ist
historically, is this a clear, is this
No,
a true
In
illustration? Yes, it is a
1789
true
to 1799, Gregorian years. This 99 on that chart is
It's
the
Gregorian, yeah.
no, it's
Also,
an agricultural year.
but
So-
it's an agricultural year, but it's
Der
transferred to Gregorian time.
Französische Revolution war 1789 bis 99 gregorianische Kalender und auf den Karte, das ist der Agra-Jahr, der dargestellt ist. Und wo bist du
But,
heute?
but this is agricultural year, but it's 1798 in the agricultural year, but it's according to Gregorian time, it's 1798 to 99.
Also es ist 1798 der gregorianische der Agra-Kalender, aber gemäß der gregorianische Kalender, es wäre 1798-99.
Yes.
It
So-
doesn't matter, I'm not going to argue with you. I've made my point.
A question. In 2014 there was not a king of the north.
Also in 2014 gab es keinen König des Nordens.
Margaret, it's
No.
this parallel.
That's-
Obama.
Yes. But we must understand, right,
Typifying.
typifying the Sunday law.
Also es schattet den Sonntagsgesetz vor uns.
So, in this sense, this two-horned beast started to rule there, which is basically the north.
So in diesem
Church and
Sinne,
state
diese
comes
zweihörnige Macht fing an, da zu regieren, was das Norden ist, Staat und Kirche.
You can also parallel it with 1989.
Wir können das auch mit 1989 parallel legen.
So, okay. Anyways, now let's just go to the back to the notes.
So, lasst uns zu den Notizen gehen.
And okay, let's begin with this next quote on the bottom of page 1.
So, wir fangen an mit diesem nächsten Zitat unten auf Seite 1. I don't have pages, which quote is it on?
Under the heading "The Beginning of the Revolution."
Also der zweite Zitat in den Notizen unter dem Titel Das Anfang von Revolution.
It says at the very beginning. That's now from Leroy Froome. It's not by Sister White.
Also das ist nicht von Ellen White, das ist von einer der Pioniere, Leroy Froome.
It says at the very beginning a difficulty arose over the question of votes. Should they be counted by head or by estate? So basically back then the French Revolution also started based upon, something to do with election.
So damals die französische Revolution fing an mit irgendetwas zu tun mit Wahlkampf.
As this question was not resolved in a manner satisfactory to the Third Estate, the latter on June 17 proclaimed itself the National Assembly. This was the first revolutionary act. The king annulled this decision, whereupon Mirabeau declared that the assembly would not disperse, and on July 9, 1789, it declared itself to be the Constituent Assembly. On July 14, 1789, the proletarians of Paris seized and destroyed the huge royal fortress of Bastille, the grim, visible emblem of absolutism. So that's basically this Bastille Day. Maybe you know this. This was the storming of the Bastille.
Dies markiert diesen Bastille-Tag, das ist, wenn sie den Bastille eingenommen haben.
And that marks basically the beginning of the French Revolution.
Und das markiert das Anfang von französischer Revolution.
Okay, so now let's jump down to the next paragraph.
So, zur nächsten Absatz.
It says in November the Protestants, and it's not referring to the Protestant Christians but to the Protestants.
Also
Okay.
es sagt hier Protestanten, aber das ist nichts mit Christen zu tun, sondern die protestiert haben.
Were raised to political equality with full religious freedom. On the other hand, the Catholic Church was deprived of all its property, though the clergy was assured of receiving a reasonable remuneration. Okay, so basically here now you could see how now the churches or the church goods got confiscated.
So, hier können wir sehen, wie die Gemeinden oder die Güter der Gemeinde beschlagnahmt wurden.
Okay, now jump down a little bit.
Und wir kommen hinunter,
Let's go to the last paragraph of this quote.
zur letzten Absatz dieses Zitats.
So they basically now made some stipulations, how they would allow still the Catholic faith to be there in France. Okay.
So, die haben einige Bedingungen dargelegt, wie die katholische Gemeinde immer noch innerhalb der französischen
Reich
sein kann. Ja.
That meant a clear break with Rome and its hierarchical and political influence, and a return to the principles of original Christianity. Many bishops and clergymen refused to accept this new relationship, and the Pope, after a period of hesitation, condemned the civil constitution of the clergy. From thence forward, the bitter struggle between the revolutionists and the Church began, which ended not only in the elimination of the Church in France, but in the overthrow of the Christian religion and the proclamation of the Goddess of Reason in the Cathedral of Notre Dame, now covered into the temple of reason. Converted in the temple of reason. Okay, so basically we all know the outcome. The Catholics lost the battle, and the French Revolution was then the victor in this.
Also wir wissen, wie die Geschichte ausging. Die Katholiken haben verloren und die Französische Revolution ist entfacht.
Oder war siegreich.
War siegreich.
Okay. So now let's go to the next quote. That's by Sister White from
So.
the Great Controversy.
Nächsten Zitat, das ist von Großen Kampf von Ellen White.
It says here, the beast that descendeth out of the bottomless pit shall make war against them and shall overcome them and kill them. The atheistical power that ruled in France during the Revolution and the Reign of Terror did wage such a war against God and His holy word as the world had never witnessed. The worship of the deity was abolished by the National Assembly. Bibles were collected and publicly burned with every possible manifestation of scorn. The law of God was trampled underfoot. The institutions of the Bible were abolished. The weekly rest day was set aside, and in its stead, every 10th day was devoted to reveling and blasphemy. Baptism and the communion were prohibited, and announcements posted conspicuously over the burial places declared death to be an eternal sleep. The fear of God was said to be far from the beginning of wisdom, that it was the beginning of folly. All religious worship was prohibited, except that of liberty and the country. The constitutional bishop of Paris was brought forward to play the principal part in the most impudent and scandalous farce ever acted in the face of a national representation. So, who did they take?
So, wen nahmen sie ein?
Yes, this Bishop of Paris, right?
Also, Bischof von Paris.
Okay. And then it goes on to say,
Es sagt weiter.
he was brought forward in full procession to declare to the convention that the religion which he had taught so many years was in every respect a piece of priestcraft which had no foundation, either in history or sacred truth. He disowned in solemn and explicit terms the existence of the deity to whose worship he had been consecrated, and devoted himself in future to the homage of liberty, equality, virtue, and morality. He then laid on the table his episcopal decorations and received a fraternal embrace from the president of the convention. Several apostate priests followed the example of this prelate. Okay, so what did this bishop do?
So, was tat diesen Bischof?
Denied the faith.
Yes, so basically he denied Catholicism.
Also, hat
Catholicism.
den Katholizismus verleugnet.
Okay, and he then went along with the southern power, right?
Und ist mitgelaufen mit diesen Südmacht.
Okay, so in this sense, you can see somehow that these, basically the Catholic Church, here they try to make friends with the southern power.
So, wir können sehen hier, dass diese katholische Mächte versuchen, Freundschaft mit diesen Südmacht zu schließen.
Okay. And this is also mentioned here in the next quote.
Und in der nächsten Zitat, Erwähnung davon ist auch gemacht.
Okay, this is again by Froome.
Das ist wieder von Leroy Froome.
It says, in the latter part of 1793, the revolutionists abolished the old calendar of the week and introduced a new one, dating it from September 21st, 1793, with new names for the month and 10-day periods for weeks, and with each 10th day devoted to the new worship. Pastors who continued to observe the weekly day of the past were to be imprisoned. And then the next paragraph.
Nächster Absatz.
Liberty now became the new god. Trees of liberty were planted in streets and squares around which rich and poor danced. The tricolor of France, the rights of man, the national holidays, and the constitution became the new ritual. Now the great of the present, having been massacred, and the illustrious of former ages, having been insulted, there remained nothing but heaven itself for them to direct their fury against. Pasch, however, Herbert and Chomet, leaders of the municipality, expressed their determination to dethrone the king of heaven, as well as the monarchs of earth, and prevailed upon Gobel, apostate constitutional bishop of Paris, to abjure the Christian faith. This was in 1793. Shortly after, Herbert and his group appeared at the bar on November 10th to declare that God did not exist and that the worship of reason was to be substituted in his stead. Okay, so it's basically, you can see how the southern power basically eradicated everything what had to do with religion and what was there before. Right?
Also ihr könnt sehen, wie der Südmacht alles, was mit Religion zu tun hat, was zuvor da war, vernichtete.
And obviously they had a false concept of what was religion. They only knew the Catholic religion.
Und natürlich hat die eine falsche Vorstellung von das, was religiös war. Sie kannten nur die Katholizismus.
So in this sense, this is also what we can see here in a small measure, right?
So, dies ist, was wir hier sehen können im kleinen Maß.
And well, they go now against all what is religious, and they basically want to retract everything that has been done before. Okay.
Wie sie gegen alles religiös gehen und sie wollen auf den Kopf stellen all das, was zuvor gemacht worden ist.
And so we can see definitely the same mentality, the same spirit now in our time.
Also in unserer Zeit können wir auf jeden Fall derselbe Mentalität, diesen selben Geist erkennen.
Okay, so that's basically the thought I wanted to share, but I also want to just add something to it.
Also das war im Grunde die Gedanke, die ich mitteilen wollte, aber ich möchte was da hinzufügen.
And because here at the Sunday law, who begins to rule?
So hier am Sonntagsgesetz, wer fängt an zu regieren,
When you now look at the north or the south?
wenn wir das Norden oder Süden in Betracht ziehen?
The north,
Das ist
right?
der König des Nordens.
So in the north rules for the 1260, right?
Und den Norden regiert für die gesamte 1260.
Okay, but let's just turn to Daniel chapter 2.
Aber lasst uns Daniel Kapitel 2 aufschlagen in unserer Bibel. Daniel 2.
So let's begin in verse 1.
Und wir beginnen in Vers 1.
And it says, and in the second year of the reign of Nebuchadnezzar, Nebuchadnezzar dreamed dreams, wherewith his spirit was troubled, and his sleep brake from him. Okay, so what happened to Nebuchadnezzar?
So was geschah mit Nebukadnezar?
He was troubled, right?
Also war beunruhigt.
And where on our line is he troubled, and why is he troubled?
Und wo auf unserer Linie ist er beunruhigt und wozu? Oder weswegen ist er beunruhigt?
Yes, it's at the Sunday law, right?
Am Sonntagsgesetz.
And why is he troubled?
Und warum ist er beunruhigt?
Because of what's happening.
Yes,
Because of
because
his vision, but it would be because of what's taking place in the world.
yes, because of the Sunday law he's
So,
troubled, right?
wegen des Sonntagsgesetzes, also ist er beunruhigt.
Because the Sunday law, according to Matthew 24, it's a time of trouble such as never was, right?
Den Sonntagsgesetz gemäß Matthäus 24 ist eine Zeit des Trübsals, wie es noch nie so gegeben hat.
So basically here the time of trouble begins.
So ist es hier, dass Zeit des Trübsals fängt an.
Okay, so who is Nebuchadnezzar illustrating now here with respect to north or south?
Und in Bezug auf Norden und Süden, wen stellt Nebukadnezar hier dar? King of the North.
He's the king of the
Er
north,
ist der
right?
König des Nordens.
He makes the Sunday law.
Er erlässt das Sonntagsgesetz.
Okay, so and the king of the north, when he makes the Sunday law, is he evil or good?
Und wenn der König des Nordens, wenn er das Sonntagsgesetz erlässt, ist das nun mal böse oder gut?
Evil,
Das ist
right?
böse.
So here, right, Nebuchadnezzar, he's this false king of the north, right?
So hier, Nebukadnezar ist diesen falschen König des Nordens.
He's Satan's agent.
Satans Agent.
Okay, but at the end, right, we studied this. Daniel now comes before him,
Aber am Ende, und dies haben wir studiert, Daniel kommt vor ihm.
and now let's go to verse 46.
Das ist jetzt Vers 46.
Says, Then the king Nebuchadnezzar fell upon his face and worshipped Daniel, and commanded that they should offer an oblation and sweet odors unto him. The king answered unto Daniel and said, Of a truth it is that your God is a God of gods and a Lord of kings, and a revealer of secrets, seeing thou couldest reveal this secret. Then the king made Daniel a great man, and gave him many great gifts, and made him ruler over the whole province of Babylon, and chief of the governors over all the wise men of Babylon. So,
Bis Vers 48.
what is he doing to Daniel at the end?
So was tut er zu Daniel hier am Ende?
Lift them up.
Yes, he gives him rewards, and he's basically lifting him up.
Er belohnt ihn und hebt ihn auf. Also er hebt ihn.
Okay, and in Daniel chapter 3,
Und in Daniel Kapitel 3,
you have the same illustration, right?
es gibt denselben Darstellung.
Nebuchadnezzar, at the beginning, he makes the sun-law, the golden image.
Nebukadnezar am Anfang macht das Sonntagsgesetz, der goldene Standbild,
But at the end, he makes a counter decree and lifts up the three Hebrew boys. Right?
aber am Ende macht er ein Gegendekret und er erhebt die 3 hebräischen Jungen.
So, what work is Nebuchadnezzar doing at the end?
So, was für ein Werk tut Nebukadnezar am Ende? A righteous work,
Yes, a righteous work,
ein
right?
gerechte Werk.
So, what king is he?
So, welcher König ist er? At the end, you mean.
Yes.
So am Ende.
Yes, he's a true king of the
Er
north,
ist der
right?
wahre König des Nordens.
Okay, so there's something that we need to recognize, that at the beginning, he's illustrating the false king of the north, but at the end, he's illustrating the true king of the north.
Und das ist das, was wir erkennen müssen. Am Anfang stellt er den falschen König des Nordens dar, aber am Ende des wahren Königs des Nordens.
Okay, and
But you see, that's what you see in Esther, because Ahasuerus is the same, right? Ahasuerus is also an earthly king, but we read this morning, when you go and stand before the king, you perish, you perish. So he's represent Christ. He puts out the golden scepter. So when you stand before the king, if he accepts you, it's because he's representing Christ in that sense, and if not, he will execute judgment upon you.
Also wir können dasselbe in die Geschichte von Esther sehen, wie wir heute Morgen gesehen haben, dass wenn der König den Zepter ausreicht und Esther begnädigte, da tut er eine gerechte Werk von Christus. Also wenn er dich begnadigt, dann tut er das Werk Christi. Und wenn du vor dem König kommst und du bist nicht gerecht, also dann wirst du sterben.
It's the Medo-Persian kingdom, right? It begins there, and it's just the work that he's doing at the end.
So, es ist der Medo-Persische Königreich ganz hindurch. Das ist nur das Werk, der dargestellt wird, was er am Ende tut.
yes, okay. So what would affect the change in Nebuchadnezzar, in the sense that at the beginning he's this false king of the north, and at the end he's the true king of the north?
So, was würde denn die Veränderung in Nebukadnezar bewirken? Also in dem Sinne, dass am Anfang war er der falsche König des Nordens, am Anfang, und am Ende war er der wahre König des Nordens. Was bewirkte den Veränderungen?
When you just look at for instance, also at the story of Daniel chapter 2.
Also
Okay.
wenn du zum Beispiel die Geschichte von Daniel 2 anschaust.
What's the difference between Nebuchadnezzar at the beginning and at the end?
Was ist der Unterschied von Nebukadnezar am Anfang und am Ende?
He's ignorant, and then he's not ignorant.
Also am
Okay.
Anfang ist er ignorant und am Ende eben nicht.
And maybe he's even more than ignorant. What is he at the beginning?
Arrogant.
Proud and
Yeah,
builds
but
himself up.
Er ist vielleicht mehr als ignorant.
Why-
Was ist er am Anfang?
why does he pass the Sunday law?
So, warum erlässt er den Sonntagsgesetz?
Puts himself into
Is this not my kingdom that I've built for
No,
them?
that's, he said that afterwards. But
What does Isaiah 23 say?
So was sagt Jesaja 23?
What does Tyre do?
Was macht Tyrus?
giving them the
Yeah,
wine.
sings, right? In the time of peace, Tyre sings in the background, right?
So in der Zeit des Friedens Tyrus singt im Hintergrund.
So, and what does the singing represent?
Und was stellt das Singen dar?
The doctrines.
Yeah, deception, right?
Diese falsche Lehre, also
So-
Verführung.
The papacy, the woman, deceives the kings.
Also
Right?
die Papsttum, die Frau, die verführt die Könige.
So Nebuchadnezzar is deceived here at the beginning because the woman now sits on his mind.
So Nebukadnezar hier am Anfang ist verführt, weil die Frau sitzt auf seinem Verstand.
But what is the woman is a symbol for?
Aber die Frau ist ein Symbol für Church,
Doctrine, yes.
also für Lehre.
Okay. Yeah. The doctrine, right, controls now his mind.
Also die Lehre hat seinen Verstand
But
ergriffen.
what does Daniel do at the end
Aber was tut
with
Daniel
this doctrine?
am Ende mit diesen Lehre?
Because at the beginning, this false doctrine brings him into trouble, right?
Weil am Anfang diese falsche Lehre, das bringt ihm Trübsal.
He cannot understand what goes on and all these things.
Er
Right?
kann nicht verstehen, was passiert.
But at the end, what happens with this false doctrine on his mind?
Aber am Ende, was geschieht mit der falschen Lehre, die auf seinem Verstand ist?
Yeah, basically she gets kicked off, right?
Also sie wird niedergestoßen,
Because now Daniel gives him the true doctrine.
weil Daniel gibt ihm die wahre Lehre.
So when we go now to Romans 13,
So, wenn wir jetzt zu Römerbrief Kapitel 13 gehen,
and let's read verse 1.
Vers 1.
It says, "Let every soul be subject unto the higher powers, for there is no power but of God. The powers that be are ordained of God." So, in verse 2, "Whosoever therefore resisteth the power, resisteth the ordinance of God, and they that resist shall receive to themselves damnation." Okay, so the kings, they are established by whom?
Also die Könige werden etabliert durch wen?
By God, right?
Durch Gott selbst.
So, as long as the woman is not on the king represents Christ.
So, solange dass die Frau nicht auf dem Verstand der König sitzt, dann der König stellt Christus dar.
Yes, and
Amen.
only when the woman gets on the mind of the king, then the king is Satan now.
Also nur wenn die Frau auf dem Verstand der König sitzt, dann ist der König Satans Repräsentant.
So basically, it's only by the true doctrine presented to the kings that the woman can be kicked off his mind. Okay.
Es ist nur durch die wahre Lehre, die den Könige dargebracht wird, ist die Frau von seinem Verstand niedergestoßen.
And then, when the truth is now controlling him, he's now acting on Christ's stead and not on Satan's stead any longer.
Und dann, wenn die Wahrheit ihn kontrolliert, dann handelt er in Christi Stadt anstelle von Satans Stadt.
And that's why he brings about this counter decree and lifts God people up and all these things.
Und deswegen am Ende bringt er diesen Gegendekret und erhebt Gottes Volk und all solches.
And there's something also interesting about that.
Also es gibt was Interessantes darüber.
In Revelation 17,
Offenbarung 17.
it says, "Here is the mind that hath wisdom.
So hier ist der Verstand, der Weisheit hat.
The 7 heads are 7 mountains upon which the woman sitteth." Right.
Die 7 Köpfe sind 7 Berge, worauf die Frau sitzt.
So the lion, the bear, and then you get to the leopard. The woman's also sitting on the mind of the leopard.
Yes. Also der Löwe, der Bär und danach der Leopard. Also die Frau sitzt auch auf diesen Verstand.
But it's not. It's basically showing us here that the papacy is changing tactics.
Also das zeigt uns, dass der Papst seine Taktik wechselt.
It's gone from this outward religious mode to this other mode, because they control both sides of the spectrum.
So, die gehen von diesem äußerlich religiöses Modus zu diesem anderen Modus, denn der Papsttum oder die Jesuiten oder wie auch immer, die kontrollieren beide Seiten.
Yeah. So
Yes, and that's what we saw with the Bishop of Paris, right?
Das ist das, was wir mit dem Bischof von Paris auch gesehen haben.
He went along with the south.
Also er ging Hand in Hand mit dem Süden.
You remember?
Könnt ihr erinnern,
Just-
wie wir es gelesen
okay.
haben?
So, yes, okay. And maybe let's also turn to Genesis 41.
Also vielleicht gehen wir auch zum ersten Buch Mose 41.
Because now here, let's read verse 7 and 8.
So lasst uns die Verse 7 und 8 lesen.
And the 7 thin ears devoured the 7 rank and full ears, and Pharaoh awoke, and behold, it was a dream. And it came to pass in the morning that his spirit was troubled, and he sent and called for all the magicians of Egypt, and all the wise men thereof, and Pharaoh told them his dream, but there was none that could interpret them unto Pharaoh. So, what happens? Where is Pharaoh, and what happens to him?
So, was geschieht? Wo ist Pharao und was geschieht mit ihm?
Yes, he's troubled like Nebuchadnezzar, right?
Also er ist betrübt, genauso wie Nebukadnezar,
Oder beunruhigt.
beunruhigt.
And where is he standing?
Und wo steht er?
The sun,
Am
right?
Sonntagsgesetz.
So it's the exact same story as in Daniel chapter 2.
So genau
Right.
derselbe Geschichte wie in Daniel Kapitel 2.
So, but this Pharaoh, we always call him good Pharaoh, right?
Aber dieser Pharao, den nennen wir immer den guten Pharao,
Because he's now treating afterwards Joseph kindly. Okay?
weil danach er geht mit Josef sehr günstig, also gut um.
But we must understand he's evil at the beginning.
Aber wir müssen verstehen, dass am Anfang ist er wohl böse,
Because he makes the son-in-law just like Nebuchadnezzar, because he's a peril to Nebuchadnezzar. He's Nebuchadnezzar, right?
weil er ein Sonntagsgesetz erlässt, genauso wie Nebukadnezar. Der ist ein Parallel zu Nebukadnezar, er ist im Grunde Nebukadnezar.
Because it's Nebuchadnezzar and this Pharaoh is just one and the same person, right?
Also Nebukadnezar und diesen Pharao ist ein und derselbe Person.
They both have the dream, they both are troubled, they both call the magicians, and then at the end God's people
The 7
interpret
years.
it. Yes.
Also die beiden haben einen Traum, die beiden werden beunruhigt, die beiden rufen die Magiker und die beiden,
God's people then at the end explain the dream.
okay, thank you. Am Ende Gottes Volk erklärt beiden den Traum.
Okay, and also with Pharaoh, Joseph stands at the end and basically gives the interpretation of the dream, and Pharaoh then is also changing for the good and exalting God's people. Right?
Und am Ende Josef steht vor Pharao und erklärt ihm die Wahrheit und Pharao auch, genauso wie Nebukadnezar, ist verändert und tut Gottes Volk gut und erhebt sie.
So it's basically you have these illustrations over and over again. As long as this woman controls them, they are the false north. But as soon as the woman is taken away, they are now the true north.
Also diese Darstellung sehen wir wieder und wieder. Und solange dass die Frau den Norden kontrolliert, nein, ich sage das anders.
Controls them, the kings.
Also solange dass die Frau die Könige kontrolliert, sind die böse und wenn
They are the false north.
die sind den falschen Norden, danke. Und am Ende, wenn die Wahrheit erhalten, dann sind sie die guten Norden.
Yes. So in this sense, right? But you see now here it's Pharaoh. Okay.
So, in diesem Sinne können wir sehen, dass es Pharao ist.
Which is usually the south. Okay.
Und Pharao ist normalermäßig den Süden.
But we can see clearly Nebuchadnezzar and Pharaoh are one and the same,
Aber
right?
wir können klar sehen, dass Nebukadnezar und Pharao eins und dasselbe sind.
Okay. So therefore, and at the end, Pharaoh here is doing a work of Christ.
So, und am Ende Pharao tut ein Werk Christi.
Yes. So that's something we have to think through. Okay.
Und das ist irgendetwas, was wir gut durchdenken müssen.
I mean, we already understand, right? You have these two illustrations of the king of the north and the king of the south, right?
Und wir wissen bereits, dass es diese zwei Darstellungen vom König des Nordens gibt und dann König des Südens.
And one time the true illustration,
So einmal der wahre König des Nordens,
where Christ is the north
wo Christus eben der Norden ist,
and the south is Satan.
und den Süden Satan sei.
Yes. And then you have that's the true.
Das ist der wahre, zweite Darstellung.
and that's the counterfeit.
Und das Fälschung,
Here you have the king of the north.
hast du wieder König des Nordens.
It's basically the papacy and the armies.
Also
Right?
das ist im Grunde der Papsttum und die Armeen zusammen.
It's kings
Also der Papst und die Könige
and the south
und der König des Südens.
would be basically what can you call it? Like the
People,
or rebels or basically I just call them Democrats.
Anarchists. Also
Democrats and that's the Republicans.
die hier oben werden die Republikaner und da unten werden die Demokraten sein.
Republicans.
Republicans.
Okay, so therefore when Satan, he's the true south, right?
Also Satan, der ist der wahre Süden.
So even though when he assumes in this illustration, when he assumes the form of the papacy, the counterfeit north,
So in dieser Darstellung, wenn er den Form des Papsttums einnimmt, was der gefälschte König des Nordens ist,
he's still in the true sense the south,
im
right?
wahren Sinne, der ist immer noch der Süden.
So and Satan is this dragon, right?
Und Satan ist dieser Drache.
And who's the dragon?
Wer ist der Drache?
Pharaoh, right?
Das ist Pharao.
So and Pharaoh gets punished by Nebuchadnezzar, right?
Und Pharao wird von Nebukadnezar bestraft.
In the book of Ezekiel.
In das Buch Hesekiel.
Okay.
That's a different Pharaoh though, right?
Yes.
Yes. I mean that's when he's illustrating the north. Right?
Also
The
das ist, wenn
concept
er
north.
den
When he's making a Sunday law, yeah.
falschen Norden darstellt, wenn er den Sonntagsgesetz erlässt.
So in this sense, somehow this Pharaoh in Genesis 41 at the beginning, he must be this kind of Pharaoh, right?
So dieser Pharao in 1. Buch Mose am Anfang, er muss eben diesen Pharao sein, also der falsche König des Nordens.
Yeah. So, but when he comes to the end,
Aber wenn er hier am Ende ankommt,
that's not something I don't know how to fully explain, but at the end he also does a work of Christ,
also
right?
das ist eine Sache, die ich nicht gänzlich weiß zu verstehen, aber er tut auch ein Werk Christi am
So
Ende.
somehow Pharaoh must also illustrate in some sense sometimes the true king of the north.
Also
Okay.
manchmal irgendwie, Pharao muss auch der wahre König des Nordens
It's like
darstellen.
Cyrus sets the people free. That's what Pharaoh does also. He sets you over all the land of Egypt.
Kyros erlässt den Volk gehen, der setzt sie frei. Und das ist auch, was Pharao tut. Er erhebt Gottes Volk und gibt sie über das ganze Reich
Yes,
Ägyptens.
it's only because he's usually always the south, right?
Das ist only? I don't understand that word.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Pharaoh's usually only the south.
Also Pharao ist normalermäßig nur den Süden.
So, but now
Literally,
here,
but not always symbolically.
so but in this illustration he is also even the true north. Okay?
Aber in dieser Darstellung, die Bruder Mark eben erwähnte, dann ist er auch der wahre oder spielt die Rolle des wahren Königs des Nordens.
Yes, in Genesis 41 when he now lifts Joseph up and gives the blessings and the presents and all these things.
In 1. Buch Mose 41, wenn er Josef erhebt und ihm die Geschenke und die Reichtümer und das Land und so weiter gibt.
So that's definitely some new
Konzept.
even added to all this already difficult illustration. Okay?
Also das ist ein neues Konzept, der hinzugefügt ist zu diesem sowieso schwierigen Thema zu begreifen.
Okay, so it's just something we really need to seek God that He really explains these things to us.
Und das ist eine Sache, wofür wir den Herrn ernstlich suchen müsstest, sodass er uns diese Sachen klar zeigen
We
mag.
understand that's the revelation, right? This is the book of Daniel that He wants to open up to us, the north and the south.
Und wir verstehen, dass es eben die Offenbarung, das Buch Daniels, das Kampf zwischen dem Norden und Süden ist, die der Herr uns auftun möchte.
Mhm.
Amen.
Okay, so I wanted to just leave you with those thoughts and let us then pray that God can open these things up to our minds.
So, ich möchte uns mit diesen Gedanken lassen und beten, dass der Herr diese Sachen unserem Verstand auftut.
Amen.
Amen. Dann lass uns mit Gebet schließen.